Tonight we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors, mostly around the Montreal Canadiens. The Jeff Petrie trade is still something we might see. Could appear Luc Dubois trade to Montreal happen sooner than we might think. We have a lot of comments that give us some good insight from his agent and more. Plus we have updates on the Calgary Flames. What is next? Could a Matthew Tkachuk trade follow a Johnny Gaudreau departure? And we have other updates from around the league as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned tonight, we're taking a look at some trade rumors, mostly with Montreal, a little bit with Calgary, and a few other news items here as well. First up, looks as though the Philadelphia Flyers, they've been pretty quiet so far in free agency, not doing a whole lot, but they do appear to be adding to their coaching staff. Elliot Friedman's reporting that it sounds like they're adding former San Jose assistant coach and former head coach and junior Rocky Thompson to their staff as an assistant coach. Of course, Rocky Thompson, like I said, formerly of the Sharks. He was the guy that was rumored to have, I'm not sure if it actually happened or it came close to happening, but back before the Evander Kane situation really came to complete head and before he left the Sharks through the contract termination, there was rumors that he was, almost in a fight with a coach, and it's believed to have been Rocky Thompson. Now, Rocky Thompson just very recently as well worked with the St. John Sea Dogs as an advisor for the Memorial Cup, and of course helped them along with the new head coach Gardner McDougall, who came over as a temporary new head coach, that is, from University of New Brunswick, helped them win the Memorial Cup and win a junior championship. So he's working his way back to the NHL, looks like, with the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, of course, one of the items I want to take a look at here as well today is the Calgary Flames. The Johnny Gaudreau departure. What comes next? Could it be a Matthew Tkachuk trade? There's all kinds of rumors and speculation about what's next and what is Tkachuk's move here, because we know that he has, a situation where he needs a new contract. He could hold them into getting a one-year deal, and unfortunately, the Calgary Flames, depending on how Tkachuk goes about this, very well could be in the same scenario next year where they're faced with possibly losing a star player to free agency. So we don't know how this is going to go. But we did see Johnny Gaudreau introduced to the media today by the Columbus Blue Jackets as their new prize free agent signing. Of course, he was very excited, very happy. No big surprise there. Even ended up taking some questions from the media. And actually, his old pal from Calgary, Eric Francis, even asked him a bit of questions about his departure from Calgary, and he really didn't want to talk about it. I'm kind of, the look on his face, it felt like he couldn't get away from Eric Francis, because Eric Francis of Sportsnet has been saying for years that Johnny Gaudreau was going to depart free of free agency as soon as he had a chance to leave Calgary, that he was going to do that. And I know for the most part, a lot of people have kind of been Eric Francis haters and kind of said, you know what, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He just doesn't like Johnny or whatever the case may be. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Eric Francis and his reporting style and all that, but he was right. And you know what? Maybe he didn't have anything to base it on. Maybe it was just a gut feeling. Who knows? But at the end of the day, Johnny Gaudreau did leave Calgary, just as he's predicted and said numerous times throughout the last number of years here. But of course, the main explanation that Johnny Gaudreau gave was that they decided, meaning they as in he and his family, that they weren't going back to Calgary, that it was time for a change. Before they ever decided where they were going, which is kind of makes sense based on how the news broke, because we found out the night before free agency hit, basically at the 11th hour, he informed the Flames after the Flames had tried numerous times and made numerous offers that he was not going to sign and would not be returning to Calgary. At that point, his decision was not yet made, because he couldn't speak to the other teams theoretically, on where he was going. So, of course, that's the part that nobody knows. And I guess, see, here's the twofold part. I know a lot of people are upset with Johnny, especially in the Calgary market. A lot of people feel like he backstabbed them at the 11th hour. And I understand why they might feel that way. But at the same time, I guess he doesn't really need to get into his private decisions in a public forum and really explain. It's just business. But at the same time, I understand why fans are hurt by this. He left money on the table and declined their offers. I guess it kind of feels like he led them down a road and had no intention of signing. If going into the night before saying, yeah, it's time for a change. Like, why was it time for a change? They had a really good season. They won the division. They won a playoff round. This team looked like it could be a contender with a few tweaks and additions, and it's time for a change. And he ends up going to Columbus, who is going through a rebuild, nowhere near being a cup contender, barely a playoff team, maybe could be with the additions they made, maybe next year, hard to say, in a very tough Metro division though, so again, hard to say. It's just a very confusing decision, and the comments he's made, I think, has largely angered the Calgary fan base. I think that's fair to say. I've seen a lot of it on social media today, but the big question now is Matthew Tkachuk. Of course, he's a pending RFA right now, like he has no contract, but he's 1 year away from being a UFA. Now, if he wants to, he can take this to arbitration where he'll get that 1 year deal and be a UFA next year. That would be a disaster for this Calgary Flames organization and for the fans. It would be extremely stressful, and I don't think they need to do that. I mean, at the same time, like, can you imagine? I would have a lot of sympathy for Flames fans if that indeed does take place. Calgary cannot take the chance of Matthew Tkachuk walking out the door for nothing like Johnny did next year. They can't do it. Like, if you look down the list of players that have left this organization, like the big names that they've had, whether it be Kiprusoff, Iginla, the returns have been negligent and almost non-existent. They cannot let this happen from an asset management standpoint. So there's a lot of people that feel if Matthew Tkachuk can go about this in one of two ways, he's either going to come back and say, okay, I want a long-term deal. With Gaudreau not here, you can definitely, afford to pay me whatever. Give me an 8-year deal, make me the captain, I'll sign, this is going to be my team, let's go. Or he can be like, okay, Johnny Gaudreau just left, I don't have confidence in the direction or this team like I would have if he were here, and I don't really know what I want to do, so let's just do a 1 year deal and we'll reevaluate, and that would be a disaster. If he will only sign a 1 year deal, I do think it's a real possibility, and a lot of NHL insiders are saying the same sort of narrative here, that we might see a Matthew Tkachuk trade. Is he going to force himself to where he wants to go, which we don't even know where it would be. A lot of speculation about St. Louis, his hometown. It's been talked about numerous times. But we'll see, right? I mean, it was rumored Johnny Gaudreau would go home, and he did leave Calgary. He did want that change, but he didn't go home. He ended up in Columbus, which is quite a ways from where he's from. So it's kind of confusing. But is a Matthew Tkachuk trade going to be next, or is he going to sign an 8-year deal, make this his team, and kind of run with it? I mean, I don't know what direction we're going in, but it's kind of a 50-50 standpoint at my point here, I think, right now. A lot of NHL reporters and insiders are suggesting that, obviously the Calgary Flames' focus right now is 100% on getting a long-term deal done with Matthew Tkachuk. If that does not go well, which we should know here in a not-too-distant future because of arbitration looming, then it could lead to another big move by the Flames. They could get a really good return if they do have to go down the route of a trade, which is something that you would have liked to have seen if that happened with Gaudreau. But the same thing last year, they were winning a division. Like, there's no way that it made any sense for the Flames to consider trading Johnny at the deadline. Would you want to win your division, have a good shot in the playoffs and making a run, and trading your top point producer? That doesn't make any sense, right? The way to go about it would have been to trade him before that, if you were convinced he wasn't going to stay. But of course they weren't, right? They were still optimistic they could get him on a long-term deal. But it will be very, very interesting to see if his actions impact the future of Matthew Tkachuk. Now, on to Montreal, we saw a number of things today. There was a media availability with Kent Hughes, the GM, and we also saw comments from the agent of Pierre-Luc Dubois that I want to talk about here as well. So first up, Kent Hughes talks about the fact that a Jeff Petrie trade is still one of his top priorities. He said that obviously Petrie still likes a lot about being in Montreal. There's nothing really about the city or the team or anything that he doesn't like. It's mostly the fact that it's, from a family perspective, challenging and difficult. And that's the main reason he wants to trade. So it's not so much a professional issue, it's a personal issue. So he's trying his best to accommodate him. He said that they've had lots of trade discussions around the player. They've had some offers, but they obviously haven't had an offer that they wanted to pull the trigger on. He did indicate that they were not crazy about retaining salary. Doesn't sound like that's something that they don't really want to do, and I don't really blame him on that. And it doesn't sound like it's a case where he'd be willing to include a sweetener either. I mean, yes, Jeff Petrie had a rough year last year. It ended way better than it started. But a lot of NHL reporters and insiders have said that Jeff Petrie has enough history in the NHL that other teams can kind of look past that 1 year, understand the circumstance, and still say that he has a lot of value, because we saw how he played much better under Marty St. Louis. And teams know that if his heart and soul were into it and he was because he was frustrated. It was a lot of things going wrong, right? So it wasn't a normal Jeff Petrie scenario. That at the same time that he's going to be a better player. So there is value there. There's teams that need right shot defensemen. There's teams that need offensive defensemen. And there's still a little bit of a free agent carousel moving on here. We know Dallas had interest. They're losing John Klingberg. But it doesn't look like that. If you look at their cap situation, without making a big move of some sort, it's not going to work out. They have like $10 million in space, and they have not signed Jake Ottinger or Jason Robertson. We don't know if they're going to go long-term with them or bridge, but either way, that money's going to get eaten up real quick with those two rising stars. There's no way to take on $6 million of Petrie. There was rumor about maybe Carolina, but we saw them acquire Brent Burns, so that ship has sailed. Obviously, we saw the Flyers, who were another team mentioned, get Tony DeAngelo. So they're not going to be looking at Jeff Petrie anymore. To me, there's only a couple scenarios. And one's less likely than the other two. You got his hometown, well, sort of his hometown, like a home state team, the Detroit Red Wings, because he's a Michigan guy. Maybe that could work. Maybe. But the Detroit Red Wings were very busy in free agency and spent a lot of money. They still have some space. I just don't know that Eisman's going to want to cap out here, so it might be more challenging than it would have been, say, a week ago. So maybe, I don't know how likely. So then you're really looking at other teams with space. You're looking at teams like the Anaheim Ducks. They have a lot of space, and they need defensemen. If you look at their roster right now, there's not 6 or 7 NHL quality defensemen. They obviously traded out a bunch at the deadline, haven't replaced them. There was rumors they wanted to bring back Josh Manson. He did not. He signed in Colorado. Maybe there's a fit there. I don't know how Jeff Petrie feels about Anaheim. I don't know how Anaheim feels about him. But looking at things, that to me could be a scenario. They have to get to the cap floor. I'm not even sure that they're at the cap floor. Actually, they have so much space. You get the Buffalo Sabres. That could be a possibility. Obviously not quite where he's from in Michigan, but it's not super far. Gets them into the U.S. at least. A little bit easier to get back and forth. And then you get Arizona. Like those are the kind of like some of the few teams that really have the space. I don't really know how everybody feels about it. I mean, Arizona may not be interested. I mean, I know they're kind of, not exactly looking to bring in a lot of quality players right now, so to speak, right? But Buffalo might be an option. Those are the teams I see as being the most likely destinations because we don't have to worry. It's not a rumor that Petrie's being discussed as a trade option. Ken Hughes has confirmed that 100%. He's having lots of conversations. They've had offers. They just haven't had anything to pull the trigger on yet. But it's something they're going to continue to explore, and he labeled it as his top priority. So it's still pretty likely if they find the right deal. So the conversations will be ongoing pretty much on a daily basis. And there's still enough players in free agency that haven't signed yet. The teams are not completely settled. So as time goes on here, and you see other moves, it kind of eliminates other options from taking place, right? So we'll see where that goes. He talked about Carey Price. Carey Price is not going to be anywhere near confirmed whether or not he can play until we likely get to camp. Creates a big, question mark over this team. Will they be able to put his contract on LTIR or not? They don't know. They would prefer not to. Even if he can't play, they like to be in a cap situation where they don't need to do that. Obviously, I don't see a trade of Jake Allen because it's not something that you can bank on. That you need an NHL goalie, and so the price for Allen would be really high, unlikely to take place. But Carey Price did have a plasma type of injection into his knee, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. I believe he said that there's another appointment here coming up. And until he gets on the ice and gets to the camp, they're really not going to know. So to be honest, we can't not bank at all on Carey Price playing this year. Maybe. At this point, it's a big question mark. And probably seems less likely than the opposite. But like I said, that's something we're not going to know. It's heavily rumored that they're still looking to move players like Christian Dvorak, Mike Hoffman, Armia to a degree too. Problem is that all of those players underperformed last year, and that most teams would expect them to retain salary on a trade, and that's not really something that the Habs and Ken Hughes really are caring to do. They don't really want to retain or add sweeteners if they can help it, but it's kind of the nature of how things works. I don't know. They might have to hang on to some of these players a little bit longer and hope they play a little bit better before they get more value to move on so that they don't have to do that. But ultimately, those are all players that are in the mix, having discussions around. It's just challenging right now because of the value not being as good as they would like. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, they actually had an open conversation between, there's comments from his agent and Kent Hughes. Now look at this. So his agent comments and said the only reason, and I'll show you on the screen here a little snippet of the from Twitter, some quotes here from the agent saying essentially he technically can comment on the situation because he's a restricted free agent without a contract right now. So he's theoretically, yes, Winnipeg holds his rights, but he's not under contract. So making a comment about another team is not technically against the rules. It doesn't create a conflict. But he does confirm 100% that playing in Montreal is something that he wants. Like, okay, so this is not a rumor anymore. It's confirmed. Pierre-Luc Dubois 100% wants to be in Montreal. And if he has to wait until he's an unrestricted free agent, it seems like he's prepared to do that. But at the same time, it seems like Montreal, knowing that he wants to be there, the interest appears to be mutual. So it looks like they're trying to engage, at least, I think it's fair to say, I don't know how far things are going. They may not get too far with the Winnipeg Jets to try to facilitate a deal. That's my take on this. So he also had comments from Kent Hughes, who was asked about this in the media availability today too. And he obviously said, considering he's on another team, even though he's not signed, we don't hold his rights. I'm not going to comment on it specifically. That, from his perspective, I think would have been wrong. So good on him not to do that. But he did say this. He said, given the opportunity to acquire a big, young, strong top center, I would absolutely be interested. So he, instead of saying I would be interested in Pierre-Luc Dubois, he basically described him and said if that player were available, I would be interested. So I don't think we need to say that Montreal and Dubois, this whole thing, is a rumor anymore. It's confirmed that there's mutual interest. They like the player wants to go there. It's a matter of how do they make it happen? Do they get a trade done sooner than later? Winnipeg knows that long term he doesn't want to be there. I think that's fair to say that now. I don't think we don't have to speculate if that's the case. But of course at the same time, Winnipeg needs quality players. Now we've seen what Pierre-Luc Dubois did in Columbus when he wanted out. He was not giving his full effort there. I would hope that if he stays in Winnipeg and plays this year, or at least part of it, that he doesn't do that, because that's a real bad look. I know he had a bit of I think his relationship with Tortorella at the end of his time in Columbus, it really appeared to really gone toxic there. And we've seen a few shifts where Dubois just didn't try. There's no doubt. And it kind of accelerated things. If he gets to camp in Winnipeg and he's still a Jet, I'm afraid I can't predict the future, of course, but we've seen him do it before. Would he do it again? They kind of forced their hand. I don't know. I'd hope not, because to me that's a character issue. Listen, like you're a Winnipeg Jet for right now. Do your best. Help your team. Go to the Canadiens if and when you're able to. Whatever, but you can't do that. That's really not the way to do business, in my opinion. But, that's up to him how he wants to conduct himself, I guess. But that would be my concern if I'm Winnipeg, right? So, and also it appears as though the Canadiens are trying to engage in conversations. We'll see if they can get something worked out. But it may not happen. It's hard to say, right? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean it won't at some point. At some point, Kevin Cheveldayoff's patience will wear thin, and he will eventually make the trade, I would think. He's not going to want to let him go for nothing. Obviously, if the Habs are that anxious to get him, and you would think that Winnipeg would try to use that as leverage to drive up the price to get a good return and move on. Montreal's got a pretty good-looking group of prospects now. So if I'm Winnipeg, I'm taking a look at all these guys and saying, okay, who are we most interested in here? And saying, you want Dubois, this is what you got to give me, and just kind of see how it goes. But I tell you, based on how things went in Columbus, that's just my gut feeling. I could be completely wrong. We'll see how Dubois conducts himself if he's still a Jet this fall. But that would be my worry, is that he try to force their hand, and because at the same time that lowers the player's value, it's just going to diminish the return, and it could go bad if you get something done before anything like that ever has a chance to happen. And there's mutual interest for both of them to be motivated to get a deal done. They might be more willing to pay a more premium price to make it happen. So we'll see. But some big, in my opinion, that's pretty significant news that the agent and basically Ken Hughes confirms that they all want it to happen. So if it doesn't happen, it'll happen eventually by the looks of things. And now Montreal has to wait a year or two. I guess there's always a possibility that maybe they end up going in a different direction. Maybe other things happen with the team. Maybe it doesn't make sense for them anymore. You never know, right? Things can change. But as of right now, it sure looks like there's a lot of mutual interest to make Dubois a Montreal Canadien in the near future. So let me know your thoughts on that. As everything else discussed here today, down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the crazy news here in NHL Free Agent Frenzy, the offseason. We're still going to have lots of videos here throughout the entire summer and into the fall. So no worries. We'll keep you covered 365 days a year. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.